The war was over, and the battlefield had turned quiet. The smoke had faded, and silence had taken the place of the endless noise of weapons. The Human Federation had stood victorious over the alien Varnak Empire, and with the end came the strange customs of peace offerings, and terms the kind that made soldiers uncomfortable and diplomats smile. And so it happened that among the terms of surrender, the human generals were offered symbolic prizes taken from the royal bloodlines of the Varnak, not as slaves, not as political tools, but as living trophies of a war well fought, a practice as old as history itself. Among the many choices stood a line of Varnak nobles, some tall and shining with the regal glow of their blood, others clearly proud. Even in defeat, each held their head high, refusing to look weak, and behind them, at the edge of the shadow, stood one figure smaller than the rest, wrapped in a dull cloak, face-covered hair, unkempt body, still like stone. She was not a warrior, she was not beautiful by human or alien standards. Her presence was more of a mistake than a symbol. She was the outcast daughter of the fallen Varnak Emperor, a princess who had been exiled even before the war had started, and no one spoke to her, and she spoke to no one. The other soldiers laughed at the very sight of her. What kind of reward was that, they joked? What use was a broken alien girl who had already been thrown away by her own people? Some said she was cursed, others said she was mad. But no one considered her important, and yet it was this forgotten girl that caught the eye of one man, a soldier named Logan, who had survived more battles than he cared to count. His body carried scars. His heart carried memories, and something in her silence made him pause. He stepped away from the line of generals, ignoring their questioning eyes, and walked straight toward her. The other Varnak nobles stared in disbelief, and the human officers whispered among themselves. But Logan said nothing. He stood in front of the cloaked girl, who did not lift her head, and for a long moment, nothing passed between them. No greeting, no command, no fear, just stillness. And then, in a voice barely louder than breath, he said, "I choose this one." Gasps filled the air. Someone laughed, someone cursed. One of the human advisors approached and said, "Are you sure, soldier, you can have any of the highborns? This one has no value." And Logan replied without hesitation, "I am sure." And with that, the paperwork was signed. The decision was made, and the alien girl, who had been ignored by her own people, was handed over to the one man who saw something more. As they walked away together, the girl finally spoke. Her voice cracked from lack of use, soft like wind across dust. "You could have taken any of them." "Why me?" Logan glanced at her and said, "Because you looked like you wanted to disappear. And I have felt that too once." The trip back to the human outpost was quiet. Riva, that was her name, though she had not used it in years, sat without speaking, staring out of the ship window while Logan kept watch. He did not treat her like a prisoner. He did not bark orders or try to interrogate her. Instead, he offered her food, water, a place to rest. She accepted nothing, and yet watched him with curiosity, not fear, not hate, just a strange quiet interest, as if trying to understand why this human had picked her from a world of pain. Days passed, and the soldiers at the outpost were quick to notice her. They whispered behind Logan's back, said he had made a mistake bringing in an alien who barely spoke, who refused to eat, and who flinched when someone raised their voice. But Logan did not care. He had seen what war did to the strong, and he had learned that sometimes the broken were the ones worth listening to. He tried to speak with her day by day, sitting near her when she would sit alone in the garden or by the window. He asked nothing of her. He simply spoke about simple things, about the stars, about the wind, about the way the sun looked different on this planet than it did back home. Sometimes he would tell her stories from his past, about a friend he lost, about the time he nearly died during the siege of Varan 9, about how he still dreamed of battles, even when they were long gone. And sometimes she would listen, her hands clenched, her eyes low, but listening. One night she finally responded, not with a story, not with a smile, but with a question. "Do you believe in ghosts?" Logan blinked and asked, "What kind of ghosts? The kind that haunt or the kind that wait?" And she said, "The kind that live inside us, the kind that never let go." And he nodded slowly. "I think we all carry them, some heavier than others. That night she did not sleep, and neither did he. A strange calm hung between them, not quite trust, but no longer fear. And in the deep of the night, when the lights dimmed and the station grew quiet, Logan found her standing in the garden again, her hands glowing softly, not with fire or light, but something else, something strange, like energy not yet awake. He stepped closer and saw her eyes reflecting a shimmer that was not from the moon. "Is that?" he asked softly, and she turned slowly, her voice barely holding together. "I don't know. Not yet, but it's getting stronger." And before he could speak again, the lights flickered across the outpost, once, then twice, then shut down for 3 full seconds, all systems dead, and then returned as if nothing had happened. And in that moment, she whispered again, "It's waking up, whatever it is." And Logan understood then that his choice had not been foolish, not at all, because something inside this girl was rising, something her own people had feared and thrown away, and he had brought it back to life, not with weapons, not with orders, but with kindness. And that was how it began. The days passed, but peace did not come, not to Riva, and not to the station, where whispers had grown into rumors, and rumors had become warnings. Some soldiers said she was dangerous, others kept their distance. Even the machines near her behaved strangely. Sometimes screens flickered when she walked by, and doors opened before she touched them. The air around her felt different, colder, heavier, like it was listening. Logan noticed everything, but said nothing. He watched her silently day after day, letting her keep her distance, yet never turning away. And Riva kept to herself. She would sit for hours near the windows, watching the stars, her eyes distant, her hands resting in her lap, as if she feared they might act on their own at night. She barely slept, and when she did, her sleep was restless, her breathing uneven, her body tense, like someone trapped in a cage of memories. One morning she stood in front of the mirror in the small room she had been given. Her reflection looked tired, her skin paler than before, her eyes deeper, like twin shadows holding back storms. She raised her hand to the glass, and for a moment her palm glowed with a dull light, not bright, not sharp, but alive. Then it faded as quickly as it had come, and she turned away from her own reflection, as if it was a stranger. Logan found her later in the garden, her feet bare in the soft soil, her hands buried in the earth. Asked if she needed anything. She said nothing, her eyes closed, her mind elsewhere. And so he sat beside her and waited, and after a long silence, she spoke, not to him but to the sky. "They locked it inside me," she said. "A long time ago, I was a child. And they feared what I could become. They said it was ancient. They said it was unnatural. They called me cursed. And so they put it to sleep. They buried it inside my blood, and told me never to feel too much, never to lose control." Logan listened quietly, understanding that this was no small confession, but a piece of her soul being offered like a fragile shard. And when she finally looked at him, he did not ask questions. He simply said, "Maybe they were wrong. Maybe it was never a curse at all." But Riva shook her head slowly. "It burns," she whispered. "When I feel something strong, it rises, it pulls at me, like it wants to break free, and I don't know if I can stop it. I don't know if I want to anymore." And she stood up, her hands trembling, and walked away before he could respond. Later that evening, Logan sat in the control room, going over station reports. When the power dimmed again, just for a second, the screens blinked, and one of the drones outside lost control, crashing into a wall with no clear reason. Engineers blamed a signal spike, but no one could trace it back to anything real. And Logan knew deep down it was her. The energy inside her was no longer sleeping, it was stirring. That night Riva stood alone in the observation chamber, her eyes on the stars, her fingers twitching with invisible current. She remembered her childhood, the way her parents looked at her, like she was not their daughter, but something else, something wrong. She remembered the rituals, the pain, the silence, the exile, and now here she was among humans, being watched again, being feared again. When Logan entered the chamber, she did not turn around. He walked slowly and stopped beside her, and she spoke without looking at him. "I should leave. You brought me here, but it was a mistake. I don't belong. I was never meant to be anyone's anything." And Logan replied, "I didn't bring you here to belong. I brought you here because I believed you deserved more than exile, more than fear." She looked at him then, Her eyes bright not with tears, but with something deeper, anger, maybe. Sorrow, maybe both, and she said, "Do you believe in destiny, Logan?" And he said, "No, but I believe in choice, and I chose you not because you were easy, not because you were safe, but because something inside me told me you mattered." For a moment she said nothing, then she raised her hand and opened her fingers, and between her palm hovered a sphere of light, small, spinning, silent, like a newborn star. It pulsed softly and vanished in a blink, and she whispered, "It's getting stronger, faster. It's not waiting anymore, and I don't know what it will do to me." Before Logan could answer, the alarm sounded, a soft beep, followed by a red glow. The sensors had picked up incoming vessels, not Federation, not friendly, unknown ships, fast approaching the outer perimeter. The officers scrambled to respond. Weapons were activated, shields raised, and within minutes the base was on high alert, and Logan knew this was not a coincidence. He turned to Riva, who stood frozen, her face pale again, and he asked, "What is it?" And she said, "They're coming for me. I feel them. They know I'm alive. I thought I had time, but I was wrong. They will kill me before I awaken. They fear what I carry. They will burn everything to stop me from becoming what I was meant to be." Logan made his decision quickly. He took her hand, not with force, but with urgency, and led her down the hall to the hidden escape tunnel deep beneath the station. The others were too busy preparing for attack to notice, and as they reached the exit, Riva paused and said, "Why do you keep helping me?" And Logan answered, "Because you haven't hurt anyone, and they're ready to destroy you anyway, and I won't be part of that." They escaped into the wilderness beyond the outpost, the cold night wind rushing past them, and above in the sky, the ships came closer, their engines a distant roar. And as they ran, Riva stopped and dropped to her knees. Her hands dug into the ground, and from her chest a wave of heat burst outward, not fire, not light, but pressure, like gravity, like space itself bending, and from above one of the incoming ships shuddered, broke apart, and exploded before touching the earth. Logan turned to her, his breath caught, and she looked at him, her body shaking, her voice unsteady. "It's waking. It's not just power, it's a memory. It's alive." And as the flames lit up the sky behind them, Logan understood more clearly than ever that the choice he made back then was not about winning or pride. It was about protecting something precious, something the galaxy feared only because it never tried to understand it. Now there was no turning back. The forest outside the outpost stretched endlessly under the cold stars, its trees tall and sharp, its ground covered in layers of old dust and scattered stones. Logan and Riva moved deeper into it, away from the path of the incoming enemy vessels behind them. The sky glowed with flickers of fire and metal from the explosion. She had caused a single moment of power that had destroyed a ship before it could even land, and yet she did not smile. She did not feel pride. Her hands still shook, her breath still felt heavy. They found shelter in the ruins of an old structure, perhaps once a listening post or a forgotten bunker, half swallowed by roots and vines. Its walls cracked but strong enough to block scanners. They stayed hidden inside as night stretched on. Riva sat in a corner, her arms wrapped around her knees, her eyes closed, her energy low. Logan kept watch, pacing slowly between the broken beams, always alert, always listening, his weapon ready not to harm her, but to defend her. The silence between them felt different, now not cold, not distant, but heavy, like something unspoken hung between them. Riva had shown her power not in rage, not in hate, but in fear and desperation, and Logan had seen it clearly, the strength, the control, the deep unknown force that pulsed beneath her skin. Not wild, not monstrous, but waiting, watching, listening. She opened her eyes slowly and said, "I felt it speak, not with words, but with thought. It reached into me. It showed me things I don't understand yet." And Logan sat beside her, asking, "What did it show you?" And she answered, "Stars. Not these ones, older stars from a time before memory, before names. It showed me fire and voices. It showed me myself, but not this self, another version made of light and shadow." Logan nodded, not because he understood, but because he respected the truth in her voice, and she continued, "They called it the core, not a weapon, not a gift, but something beyond both. It connects to thought, to emotion, to space itself. It does not obey, it feels, it chooses, and it chose me long ago. Before I was born they knew, they feared it, so they locked it and threw me away, hoping it would never wake. But now it was waking, and Riva could feel it more. Each hour it stirred within her, when she slept, when she spoke, even when she breathed. The energy around her grew tighter, more sensitive. The walls around them sometimes pulsed with warmth or cold, depending on her mood. Even the wind outside seemed to bend when she walked past. It was not just power, it was presence. Logan decided they could not stay hidden forever. The Federation would notice the missing ship, they would scan the area, and soon they would send search parties. And if the enemy Varnak forces still wanted her dead, they would not give up easily. He told her this gently, without panic, without fear, just truth. And she listened carefully, asking, "What do we do then?" And he said, "We move east to the dead zone. No one scans there. Too much interference and no reason for patrols. We can rest and think there. No one will bother us." They traveled through the forest for 2 days, walking mostly at night, avoiding sky patrols and sensors during the day, resting in caves or under thick canopies. The air felt heavier the closer they got to the dead zone. Sometimes their ears rang for no reason, sometimes the birds vanished and the trees leaned in strange directions. Riva said the energy was thick here, like old echoes trapped in the soil. On the third night they reached a plateau with a wide view of the land below, hills and broken towers scattered across the horizon, and at the center, a large black stone structure, half buried, shaped like a temple or perhaps a vault. They approached it slowly, the ground soft and warm under their feet. The stone doors opened without sound when Riva touched them, not with force, but with thought. Inside the air was cold and dry, the walls covered in symbols not written, but carved by pressure. Patterns that shifted when looked at too long. They found a chamber deep within, lit by natural glow from crystals hanging above. And there they stopped, finally letting themselves rest. Riva stood at the center of the room, her hands open, her body still, and she said, "I can hear it now clearly. It is not just inside me, it is calling from here too. This place was made for it, or by it, I don't know." Logan stayed near her, always calm, always steady. He had seen many strange things in his years. Nothing like this, not a girl born of enemies, not a mind joined to cosmic force, not a moment where silence spoke louder than explosions. Riva lifted her hand slowly, and the air around her began to shimmer. The ground trembled slightly, and from her chest a soft line of light extended upward, not sharp, not wild, just steady. She whispered, "It wants to show me more." And Logan asked, "Are you ready?" And she replied, "I was never ready, but I was always chosen." Light expanded, forming a sphere above her, a floating map of stars and shapes and threads, all moving together like a living mind. She closed her eyes and the chamber responded. The walls shifted slowly, revealing other paths, hidden doors, soft hums of energy, and from deep below a pulse, like a heartbeat, echoed once, then again, then stronger. Riva fell to her knees, not in pain, but overwhelmed, her hands on the floor, her voice low. "It is not just power, it is memory. It is life lived over and over. I can feel every piece of it, the fear, the wonder, the loneliness. It carries everything, and it needs to be guided, not used, not chained, just understood." Logan moved to her side, holding her shoulder, steadying her focus, and she opened her eyes, looking at him not with fear, but with a strange calm. "I know now why they feared me, not because I would destroy them, but because I could free others from their chains, because this thing inside me cannot be used for control. It breaks control, it spreads truth." He asked, "What happens now?" And she said, "They will come, all of them, Federation commanders, Varnak generals, bounty hunters, scientists. They will all come, not to destroy me, but to capture me, to own me, and we cannot run forever, but we can choose how it ends." Logan nodded once, then said, "Then we prepare not for war, but for choice." And she looked at him, her expression unreadable for a moment. Then she smiled faintly and said, "I am not alone anymore, and perhaps that is all I ever needed to awaken." The days passed slowly inside the black Stone Temple time felt different, as if it had no meaning, no start, no end. The walls held a silence. Deeper than night, a silence filled not with emptiness, but with waiting, as if the place itself had been built not as a shelter, but as a witness. Riva stayed mostly at the center chamber, where the energy responded to her presence more each day. The crystals above her pulsed with light. That changed when she moved, when she breathed, when she dreamed. Logan watched from the edges, always alert, always ready. He did not understand the full truth of what Riva carried, but he understood enough to know it was no longer a question of fear or control. It had become something more, a turning point, a choice waiting to be made, not just by her, but by the world around them. Riva spoke little. Now, not from silence, but from focus. Her mind often drifted into places even she could not name. Sometimes she would whisper things not meant for him, things about stars collapsing, about songs that held time and place, about names that could break or heal minds. He listened, quietly, never interrupting, for he had come to understand that her awakening was not just a release of power, it was a remembering of something far older than her body, far older than her people. One evening she stood before the wall of shifting stone symbols and raised her hands. The patterns changed, forming images that looked like galaxies, bending into shapes of beings not human, not alien, something more fluid, more vast. And she said, this is what they feared, not the force itself, but the connection it creates, the way it breaks lies, how it shows truth without permission. How it does not serve kings or armies, it only serves balance. Logan asked, what does it want from you? And she said, it wants to be whole again. It wants to stop hiding. It wants to speak not through destruction, but through unity. And I am only the first voice. Not far from the temple, outside the dead zone, the world was beginning to stir. Rumors had reached the ears of Federation command, not clear stories, but fragments, whispers of an alien girl with impossible abilities, whispers of a destroyed ship without weapons being fired, of a soldier gone rogue with something that could rewrite the balance of power. The commanders argued. Some demanded capture, others demanded elimination, and still others saw opportunity. A group was sent, a special unit, not marked, not official, trained for one thing: control. They moved without sound, using stealth drones and signal blockers. Their mission was clear: take the girl alive, kill the soldier if needed, extract the source, bring it back, and let the high minds decide what to do with it later. But the temple was not sleeping anymore. It felt their approach before their scanners could even activate, and inside its walls, Riva's eyes opened slowly, her breath steady, her voice calm. They are coming, she said. Not to speak, not to understand, only to claim. Logan stood and checked his equipment, but Riva shook her head. No weapons, not yet, not unless they bring war first. And she walked toward the entrance, her steps slow but certain. The walls around her shimmered slightly as she passed, her form outlined by a faint glow, not bright, not blinding, but deep like moonlight through water. When the unit reached the edge of the structure, their devices began to fail. Screens turned black, maps glitched, signals vanished. One by one they moved in, tighter, more cautious, more nervous. And then they saw her standing alone at the gate. No fear, no armor, no weapons. Just her eyes watching them like a storm behind glass. The leader of the unit stepped forward, speaking through a broken voice. Link, identify yourself, stand down, come with us, or face consequence. Riva tilted her head slightly, then raised one hand slowly, not as threat, but as answer. The air shifted like a wave passing through silence, and one by one their weapons melted, not exploded, not destroyed, just softened into dust like sand washed by wind. Froze, confused, then panicked, trying to retreat, but the doors behind them sealed closed. The temple had made its choice, and it would not allow violence inside, not unless it was needed. Riva stepped forward and said, I am not your enemy, but I am not your tool either. I will not follow, and I will not run. What I carry belongs to no nation. It belongs to the stars, to the ones who came before, and the ones still waiting to awaken. Logan arrived beside her, not raising a weapon, not shouting, simply standing with her, and his presence said everything. The unit slowly backed away. Their fear louder than orders, and the temple allowed it. The doors opened. For them the walls quieted, and the silence returned once more. Later that night, Riva sat near the center again, her body calm, her face clearer than it had ever been, and she looked at Logan and said, "I saw something when they came. I saw their fear. And it made me feel not anger, not hate, but sorrow. They are blind to what is rising. They see only control and loss, and they will come again with more fire, with more chains." Logan asked, "What can we do against all that?" And she replied, "We show them what they cannot control. We show them what cannot be broken, not with power, not with fear. We show them truth." In the days that followed, Riva's presence continued to grow. The light inside her became steady, her voice stronger, her thoughts sharper. She began to walk the halls of the temple, not as a stranger, but as someone returning home. Walls responded to her commands. Doors opened at her glance, and the chamber at the heart of the place now pulsed like a living thing. She told Logan, "The final part is near, not a battle, not a war, a choice. They must see me not as a threat, but as a mirror, and for that, I must stand before them all and speak." He looked at her, knowing what it would mean, knowing the risk, and he asked, "Are you sure?" And she said, "I was born for this moment, not because of destiny, not because of blood, but because I choose it now, and nothing they do can take that away from me." And so they prepared, not with weapons, not with armies, but with will, with truth, with the fire of choice burning clear inside both of them. For the first time in her life, Riva did not feel like an exile. She felt whole, and that was the beginning of everything. The sun rose behind the old black temple, washing its walls with a soft gold light, as if the world itself wanted to witness what was about to unfold. The air was heavy with silence, no birds, no wind, no distant engines, just a waiting quiet that seemed to reach deep into the bones. Riva stood in the center hall of the temple, her breathing calm, her hands steady, the glow within her no longer wild, no longer fearful, but settled like a calm sea after a long storm. She had made her choice, and nothing would move her now. Logan stayed close, watching, ready to guard her, but also ready to trust that she would handle what was coming. The Federation had sent another force this time. Far larger ships circled above. Soldiers gathered near the perimeter, weapons charged, shields primed. They did not want to speak, they wanted to control, and if they could not control, then they would destroy. They believed no other way was possible. But Riva stepped forward past the threshold of the temple and into the light. Her eyes clear, her mind steady. She walked with a grace born not from training, but from acceptance. The soldiers raised their weapons, voices shouting orders, warnings, threats. But she did not slow her steps. She lifted one hand, palm open, not in attack, but in peace, and the world around her shifted. Space itself bent softly around her presence, without breaking or tearing, simply bending like air around warm stone. She spoke then, her voice carrying across the valley, not loud but powerful, a voice that held truth and nothing else. "I do not belong to you, I do not belong to them. I belong to the stars, and the stars belong to every living mind. You fear what you do not understand, but that does not make me your enemy, it makes me your chance." The commanders shouted again, demanding surrender, but their voices fell against something greater. The soldiers began to see not a weapon standing before them, but a girl strong and calm, refusing to strike, refusing to kneel. Her light burned around her like a living song, one that spoke of freedom, of hope, of a power that would not crush but lift. One of the Federation officers stepped forward, his armor shining, weapons ready, and he yelled, "Stand down, or we will fire." Riva looked at him with eyes so deep and clear that even he hesitated, and she answered, "You cannot cage what was never yours. You cannot kill what will never die. What I hold cannot be stolen, because it is born from choice, not command." And then she raised both hands, and the ground trembled, not breaking, but humming like a giant voice, waking up the energy from her heart, spread outward, flowing into the soil, into the roots, into the very air. And for a moment, the soldiers felt it too. They felt every fear they had ever carried, every hope they had ever lost, every chain they had ever worn. They felt the weight And then they felt it lift, not forced, not stolen, but freed, as if Riva's power had reached inside them and said, "Look, this is who you truly are." Some fell to their knees, unable to hold back tears. Others lowered their weapons, hands shaking, because they no longer saw an alien princess. They saw a being who understood them better than they understood themselves. Logan stood by her side, his presence a steady anchor, and together they faced the whole army, not with hate, but with open eyes above them. The ships moved closer, but their pilots hesitated. Systems glitched, readings turned wild, targeting sensors refused to lock, as if the universe itself had decided to protect this girl and her choice. One captain tried to fire, but the missile would not launch. Its circuits melted harmlessly, its fuel turned cold. Riva did nothing with violence. She did everything with presence. She stepped closer to the officer still frozen before her and placed one gentle hand on his shoulder. "I will not harm you," she said, "but I will not follow you either. Tell them what you saw here. Tell them there is another way." And he nodded, not because he was ordered, but because he finally believed. The Federation ships pulled back slowly, one by one, as reports poured in of systems failing, of energy waves too complex to understand, of soldiers refusing to attack, and above all of one girl who stood alone but unbroken. Their commanders argued, tried to push for another strike, but no one wanted to obey. No one wanted to face what felt like a force of nature wrapped in human kindness. When the ships left the sky clear once more, Riva lowered her hands, breathing steady. Logan turned to her with a quiet pride in his eyes and asked, "What happens now?" She answered softly, "Now we live, now we show them another path, now we keep choosing again and again, because that is what makes us free." They walked back into the temple together, where the walls welcomed them, where the ancient echoes finally felt calm, where no one could touch them unless they wished it. Riva no longer felt alone, no longer felt cursed, no longer felt broken. What she carried inside her had awakened fully, not as a monster, but as a guide, a voice for every mind that had ever been afraid to stand alone. Over the next days, people began to come to the temple, not soldiers, but citizens, scientists, healers, even old enemies. They came because they had seen the light or heard the stories, or simply felt drawn by something they could not name. And Riva met them without fear, showing them the hall, showing them the quiet strength, showing them that there was a better way. She taught them that the core was not a weapon, that it was a living memory of countless voices, a thread that tied all minds together if they were willing to listen. And each person left changed somehow, some more hopeful, some more brave, and some finally free. Logan remained by her side, not because she needed protection, but because she was family now, his family made not by blood, but by choice. And he would never walk away from that. He would help her teach others. He would stand beside her when the next storm came, because storms always come. But now they would face them together. In time, even the Federation leaders realized they could not crush this new spark. They could only choose to respect it, to learn from it, or to lose everything trying to fight it. And so a fragile peace began to grow from the ruins of war, a peace built not on fear, but on understanding. Riva stood on the steps of the temple one morning, watching the sunrise. The light touched her hair, the wind moved around her like an old friend, and for the first time since she was a child, she felt no weight, no chain, no shadow. She had chosen her own destiny, and in doing so had given that gift to countless others who had forgotten how to choose. Logan joined her, his steps quiet but certain, and together they looked out over a world that was finally beginning to heal, not perfect, never perfect, but willing to try. And in the end, that was enough. And so the girl who had been called a curse, who had been thrown away and forgotten, became something more, not a weapon, not a queen, but a voice that would never be silenced. And beside her stood a soldier who had chosen her not as a prize, not as a tool, but as a person worth saving. And in that choice they had changed everything. No war could erase that, no empire could rewrite that, no fear could bury it again. They had chosen each other, and through that choice they had taught a broken galaxy how to hope again. The end